My name's Kevin, and my journey takes us all back to 2005. My wife and I were proud parents of two very young children, and we were expecting twin girls. But unfortunately, we received news very early on in the pregnancy that one of our girls had multiple deformities and also some serious issues with a couple of her major organs. On March 13, 2006, down at UCLA Medical, my wife gave birth to Kennedy and Candace. And Kennedy turned out just fine. You know, I've told this story hundreds of times. And when I see that photo of my baby girls, it brings me back to the very first time that I laid eyes on Candace. My heart sunk as I watched her struggle just to breathe. I also was quite saddened, and I had to remind myself that this child was made perfectly in the image of God. Yet deep down, I was very angry. Angry at God. Why did you choose? Why did you put us through this? I mean, we were God-fearing parents. We were involved here at Grace. My wife was involved with MOPS. We taught the children. I was involved in the Passion Play. Why would we have to go through something like this? Well, we lost Candace 11 days after she was born. She died of complications due to her condition of trisomy 18. And although many of my thoughts and feelings started to dissipate, I did start finding gratefulness that God had allowed us those special 11 days, and grateful that we got to bring home Kennedy. I mean, how many families go through something like this and come up empty? Well, little did I know that God had been working, and that God had a plan, and that he was going to use our tragedy to reveal himself, to reveal his love and his grace to a family that so desperately needed it. You see, a month after Candace had passed, I was at a sushi bar having lunch here locally in town. And I was there with a friend of mine, and we were reminiscing about the last 9 months. And I started to share, and about 30 minutes into my conversation, I get a tap on my shoulder. And this woman that's sitting right next to me. And she says, "I am so sorry, I've been eavesdropping on your conversation for the last half hour. And I don't know how I made it through." And I looked at her and I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, my husband and I have 2 children, and he has recently become an alcoholic. And I've had to kick him out of the house, and we're going through the divorce process right now. But nothing compared to what you have to deal with. I couldn't imagine burying a child of mine." I said, "Look, I don't know what makes you tick. I don't know what motivates you, but the only way that I made it through this was my faith in Christ." And she really didn't say much. I asked her name. "Her name's Norma. Great, Norma. I'll pray for you. Have a good day." I probably prayed for her one time. Didn't even think about that. Fast forward 3 months later, in July of 2006, and I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm there coaching in a volleyball tournament. And I'm introduced to this family I had never met before. And I was asked, "Hey, can you tell this family, who's also from Santa Clarita, goes to a Bible-believing church here in town, can you tell them about your story about Candace?" So I began to tell them. And as I finished up, I said, I finally come to a point in my life where I'm actually grateful that God chose us for this, because I simply can tell a story and I get to share my faith. In fact, this one time I was at the sushi bar and I got a tap on the shoulder, and all of a sudden this woman I had never ever met before looks at me, turns white as a ghost, and her jaw drops. "That was you?" Now mind you, I've never seen this woman before in my life. "That was you?" I'm getting chills up my spine. The hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Looking, what's coming? Let me finish the story. Okay? After your lunch, I get a knock on my door. And there standing there is my next door neighbor sobbing. I open up the door. I say, Norma, what are you doing here? Norma, that was it. That was her name. I am so sorry for stopping in on you unannounced, but I was just at the sushi bar and I met this gentleman who lost his baby daughter. And he was saying things about God and faith and there was something different about him. And I know you all go to church and there's something different about you and there's something that you both have that I don't have. And I came over to find out what it is. We invited her in and for 3 hours we shared the gospel of Christ. Since that day, Kevin, Norma's been coming to church with us every single weekend. She's been bringing her girls. Her husband checked himself into a rehab unit, got totally clean, was welcomed back to the family. Their marriage was starting to mend. He was starting to come to church, and they were this close to accepting Christ. And I thought, if that's the reason that we were chosen for this, we did as well. And I'm reminded in James 1:2, every time I read it, and it becomes so personal to me. And James 1:2 says, I have to look at it. lost my train of thought. So wrapped up in the story. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, knowing that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness.